let's give the full Brock Purdy context. And of course, this is our segment we love to do once a week. It is time for carving up the context. So, as the head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, primetime Deion Sanders says, give me my theme music. On this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, wanted to talk about Brock Purdy signing this long-term extension with the San Francisco 49ers. To give the full context and the Brock Purdy story, one must go to the beginning, where all stories begin. So he's drafted, famously, Mr. Irrelevant, 2022. Jimmy Garoppolo's the starters. Obviously, zero expectations Purdy is going to be anything more than a backup in San Francisco. And there's some injuries to Trey Lance. Trey Lance is going to be the starter. He's going to be the third overall pick from 2021. He is going to lead us nowhere past our first opening game loss to the Bears because he breaks his leg in week 2. And we have to go back to Jimmy G, who we were trying to trade. Well, the Niners get off to a rough start. Then they trade for Christian McCaffrey, and they are the best team in football, really, the second half of that 2022 regular season until Jimmy Garoppolo suffers a lower body injury against the Miami Dolphins. Brock Purdy, 7th-round rookie, who's the third stringer coming into the season, is now the starter for an elite championship expectation franchise and plays really well. They win against Miami. Then in his first start of his career, he's facing the GOAT himself, Tom Brady, and the Tampa Bay Bucks, who obviously weren't that good of a team that year, but still, first start, some big expectations, and has an awesome game. They get hot, second half of the year, they stay hot rather, win a playoff game against Seattle, win a playoff game against Dallas, and then Brock Purdy injures his elbow in the NFC title game against Philadelphia. Comes back, MVP caliber season, Niners get to Super Bowl, and if not for the greatness of one Patrick Mahomes, they probably win that Super Bowl. And then last year, injuries, and we'll get to that side of it in just a little bit. Injuries plagued the Niners all season 3 or fourth quarter of 2022 numbers. And he is signed to a long-term extension with all of that context on the board for San Francisco to see. I have been labeled by interactions that I've had on social media when it comes to Brock Purdy as a Purdy hater, which could not be further from the truth. First of all, as a guy, I love Purdy. I think he's a great leader. I think his intangibles are really, really strong. I think I don't want to say even dealt a bad hand because there was a reason he was Mr. Relevant. He was a good college quarterback at Iowa State. He was productive, longtime starter, but there was a reason he was a 7th-round pick in a terrible quarterback draft that year in 2022. But obviously, he's more than outperformed his draft status. Go back and do that draft again. He's the first quarterback off the board, no questions asked. And folks have said, what do you see this guy as Jimmy G 2.0? No, I don't. I don't. And some out there, not to name names, but a guy I have a lot of respect for, Nick Wright, has said he's basically Jimmy G 2.0. I don't think he is. Because Jimmy G, in my estimation, especially you look at some of those playoff games, oh my gosh, Jimmy G was not a good starting quarterback in the NFL. He was lifted clearly by Kyle Shanahan. And for 2022, at least, McCaffrey. And for longer than that, Debo and Kittle and a great offensive line and a great defense. I mean, he was winning playoff games, throwing 8 passes in the NFC title game against the Packers. Like, what are we talking about? His playoff numbers are atrocious if you look at Jimmy Garoppolo. Purdy came in and has had really good playoff games against the Seahawks and against the Detroit Lions in the second half of that game. He's a good playoff starts. Got a winning record in the postseason and has been impactful in all of those wins to certain degrees. Jimmy G never was. So he is not Jimmy G 2.0. I do not subscribe to that line of thinking, and those that do, I think aren't watching. And I also don't subscribe to clear top 10 quarterback. And the numbers say it. He's like top 7 in every major statistical category since coming to the league in 2022. And to that I say, okay, let's use common sense. Let's use logic. If his first 2 years, or really year and a quarter in the NFL, so all of 2023, the fourth quarter of 2022 when he came in for Garoppolo, if under the context of Jimmy G is not that good, he's immobile, can't stay healthy, noodle arm, accuracy hit or miss, not a good decision maker. If he can get to 2 NFC title games and a Super Bowl with this roster, just about anybody can make this work. Well, Brock Purdy, I don't think is in the just another guy crew. I think Jimmy G is in that crew, which is why they could win even though they had Jimmy G as their quarterback. Purdy's quite a few notches above that. But if with that cast, you are awesome, like top 3, top 4 quarterback, better numbers than Mahomes, in some cases better numbers than Allen, better than the best of the best. With those guys. And without those guys, you're a decent starter. Maybe fine. I mean, pretty good. Is it fair for us to ask questions about where you're at, somewhere in between that you're not a bad player, but you're also not an awesome player relative to the best that the NFL has to offer at the quarterback position? Because we can show you the numbers I've showed this before, with these 5. And one of those guaranteed will not be a 49er next year or moving forward. Deebo Samuel. With Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Trent Williams. This is what Brock Purdy was. Unbelievable. 29 touchdowns, 3 picks completed. Let's call that 70% of his throws. 266 pass yards per game, a passer rating of 120. I mean, that's like prime Rodgers numbers right there in terms of the passer rating. 13-1 record. That one loss was in the Super Bowl to the Chiefs when Purdy was pretty good in that game. Without those guys, he's not that good. Oh, rather, that's a bad. Sorry, we'll show that graphic in just a second. My bad. He's okay. 25 touchdowns, 21 picks. Completes 65% of his throws, 259 pass yards per game. Pass rating plummets from 120, which is like prime Rodgers numbers, to 90, which is like current Rodgers numbers. And he's 7-13. Is it fair to ask or presume he's probably a little bit closer to that one than the other one? Because what we saw from a guy who is clearly not as good as him, what we saw him do with that said roster. Is that a fair question to ask? Is it fair to ask the question, man? Because what is the true measure of not a franchise quarterback, but a great quarterback? No doubt we can win a Super Bowl with this guy at the helm. What can he do when things just kind of aren't going his way all the time? Offensive line's beat up. Maybe a receiver is hurt. Running game doesn't have it that day. Now, more times than not, you're going to lose. But can he give us a shot? Can you put us in position to win that game? And in some cases, you do actually win that football game. Because Josh Allen's done it multiple times. Mahomes, Chiefs offensive line won that great. Mahomes had a really good year. Got the Chiefs to another Super Bowl. Joe Burrow's had a bad offensive line his whole career in Cincinnati. Still puts up awesome numbers. By the way, with no running game last year. If Brock Purdy, which his numbers with his best crew suggest he's as good as those guys I just mentioned, then why is it the time when every quarterback is counted on more than any point? The fourth quarter. Particularly if you're down in the fourth quarter. What does Brock Purdy do in those spots? He is awful in every way, shape, or form. 5 touchdowns, 13 picks. Almost a 1-2-3 touchdown interception ratio, which is unheard of bad. 64% completion and pass rating of 69, which is horrible. Not even league average. Now, I certainly don't think he's that bad of a player. But if in the moments where things aren't quite perfect, you're not that good, it's fair to ask or fair to presume, which I do, you're closer to that guy. Not that guy. I'm not saying he's a bad player because no numbers suggest he's terrible. But I also don't think he's amazing, top 5, no questions asked. That's my point. That is my case. Fact of the matter, oops, let me hit my mic there. Fact of the matter is this. If Jimmy Garoppolo, if that never happens, or rather, Jimmy Garoppolo ended up on the Vegas Raiders next year. If he went out there and balled out, played not quite as well, because the supporting cast in Vegas wasn't as good as San Francisco, as we know, but played pretty well. It was fine. He was top 20 quarterback. He was okay. His starter. I may not have those questions about Purdy. But because we saw Jimmy be, okay, and then terrible without the Niners, when Purdy had all of his guys, MVP of the league potentially. When he doesn't, it's fine. He's okay. I've seen Josh Allen with a lot of imperfect rosters. Same with Mahomes. Same with Joe Burrow. Heck, guys lesser than them. Seen that with Dak Prescott. Seen that with CJ Stroud. It's fair to ask that question. And so, all of that to say, I think the Niners just made a mistake here. I don't think it would have been, because Kyle Shanahan has all the leverage in the world, I would think at least. I know he's the Super Bowls and the struggles there. I understand that. but I think he has enough level. If the Niners, if you put John Lynch in a corner and said, you have to fire one of these people, Brock Purdy or Kyle Shanahan, he fires Purdy. Like I think he just does. He moves on for Purdy before he moves on from Kyle. And with the Niners' track record of developing and drafting offensive players, and obviously the way they stack the other side of the ball, particularly in the defensive line, we can find a quarterback that works. Heck, we almost won the Super Bowl with Purdy. We almost won the Super Bowl with freaking Garoppolo. If we get a high upside player, that's the whole point of them drafting Trey Lance and trading all of those picks to get him at number 3 is because, man, this kid has a lot of upside. Problem was, that's all it was upside. He wasn't very good. But that's why they went after him the way that they did. They just happened to stumble into Mr. Relevant being much better than they anticipated. So listen, Brock Purdy deserves a contract as a starter in the NFL, but much closer to the Baker Mayfield level, around like mid-30s-esque than, oh, okay, he's in like, Allen territory and Lamar, Jalen Hurt, he's not quite. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.